Hello, my friends. And since in recent days there have been a lot of bad news from the front, today I want to start with some good news. To begin with, air defense was active in the Moscow region, and late last night there were reports of a massive drone attack. This way, the Moscovites were reminded that there is a war going on. In Moscow and the region, residents reported at least 10 explosions. Preliminary information says the strikes came from the air. There is also from the front at least a little bit of good news. In the Dobropillia direction, new successes of the Ukrainian forces have begun to appear, which the Russians are already openly confirming. According to their latest reports, the Ukrainian forces have indeed broken through to Boikivka and achieved gains. Looking at this map, the distance from the last front line to Boikivka is about 5.5 kilometers. And if you look at the geolocation map, this territory is already in the gray zone. Here is what the Russians themselves wrote about it. The situation of the Russian army in the salient west of Shahove continues to deteriorate. Ukrainian army intensified its operations in Boikivka and managed to reach the outskirts of the locality for the second time in September. Fighting southeast of Nikhanorivka has been going on since the first week of the month. Thus, even the Russians are already confirming that the Ukrainian forces have successes. And this means counterattacks are ongoing here constantly, even if it's not officially reported. The Ukrainian forces are periodically advancing in the area of Mayak and Volodymyrivka and also near Boikivka on the other side. This shows that the bottleneck here is really nearing seriously. But since there are so many Russians, it's extremely difficult to push through this territory. For now, the Ukrainian forces still need to advance about 4 kilometers and 200 meters, which is, of course, very difficult, but the work is ongoing. In the Pokrovsk direction, we can also say there is good news for now. The Russians are not moving forward, and that alone is already good news. Although the situation here remains extremely difficult, with about 50 assaults having to be repelled every day. For now, the Russians are not carrying out new assaults in the area of Rodynske and Krasny Lyman. Yesterday, a video appeared showing the evacuation of people from Rodynske, which confirms that the Russians are not on the outskirts, and most likely they have been pushed back approximately to the Krasnolymanska mine. In fact, as shown on the geolocation map, the front line runs roughly in this area, and the Russians cannot re-enter the city, which is encouraging. At the same time, the Ukrainian forces fighters described the situation as catastrophic, a very difficult situation in the Pokrovsk direction and around the city of Pokrovsk. Logistics is extremely hard. Our soldiers are holding the city and will continue to hold it. But what's happening on the southern approaches is very concerning. There are more than enough Russians. The number of Russian losses in the battles around the city is staggering. They can afford to lose a whole army, even 10 armies, for the city. They don't care at all. Battles for Pokrovsk, I think we will still see for a long time, through the fall, winter, and maybe spring. The question is how long the city can be held on moral and willpower alone, and how adequate the command decisions will be. But today, the Russians are still assaulting. Новоекономічне, Промінь, Чунишине, breaking through in the area of Звірове, Удачне, and Kotline. Over the past day, there have been no changes and the fighting continues. In the Novopavlivka direction, the Russians are assaulting Dachne, Filia, Zeleny High, and trying to break through from different sides toward Alexandrograd. But over the past day, there have been no changes along the front line. In the direction of the settlement of Pokrovske, the situation is worsening, although this hasn't yet been confirmed by the Ukrainian side. In the last few days, the Russians have claimed to have captured the villages of Berezove, Novoivanivka, and Kalynivske. For now, we are waiting for updates on the front line and official statements. Here is what Ukrainian analysts are writing about this. Today, Russia allegedly captured Kalynivske in the Dnipropetrovsk region. The OSUV Dnipro says this is fake. In comments to Suspilne, they noted that Russia sends small groups of one or two soldiers who film propaganda videos. Such groups of Russians are quickly eliminated by drones. Hopefully, that's the case. And in the Huliaipole direction, the Russians are assaulting Poltavka from two sides, but they have no success and the front line hasn't changed over the past day. In the Zaporizhzhia direction, the Russians continue the attacks near Malotokmachka and are trying to break through to Novodanilivka across the fields. In the area of Stepnohirsk, there have been no reports of new assaults so far, and the front line remains unchanged. The Russians tried to carry out a mechanized assault toward Malotokmachka, Orikhiv direction, using light vehicles. The attack ended predictably for them. The equipment was destroyed, and the infantry that attempted to scatter also met the same fate. In the Kherson direction, the Russians are shelling the right bank, but no new assaults on the island have been recorded. For now, the front line here remains stable. And now let's move to the Kostyantynivka direction. Here, the Russians are assaulting Stupochki and Plashiivka, attempting to push toward the village of Dovhabalka and towards Stepanivka. However, the front line remains unchanged, and after their major breakthrough, the Russians are not advancing further. In the Kramatorsk direction, the Russians are assaulting Novomarkove and carrying out shelling. However, so far they have been unable to advance further. The distance from the current front line to Kramatorsk is only 18 kilometers, which is very little. In the Siversk direction, the Russians are pushing beyond Serebryanka and assaulting Yampil. But there have been no new changes over the past day. Activity here has decreased somewhat as the Russians have begun another regrouping. In the Lyman direction, the Russians are assaulting Dvorichna, Kolodязі, Novoselivka, Shandriголове, Novomykhailivka, and are pushing toward Druzhelubivka. The situation here is extremely difficult, with over 20 assaults in a single day. However, for now, the loss of Shandriголове hasn't been confirmed. Reports indicate that Ukrainian forces are still eliminating Russians there and preventing them from securing positions. So this area remains a gray zone. In the Borova direction, the Russians are assaulting Novopavlivka, but so far there are no new changes and activity remains low. In the Kupyansk direction, the Russians are pushing into Kupyansk and from Stepova Novoselivka. But over the past day, there have been no changes and they are failing to quickly capture Kupyansk. In fact, Ukrainian forces have managed to stabilize the situation here within just a few days. in the Dvorichna direction. The Russians are advancing toward Dobropillia, but they have no success and the situation remains unchanged. In the area of Velykyi Burluk, the Russians are assaulting Odradne, and the situation here has worsened significantly in recent days. However, the fighting continues and Ukrainian forces are not retreating further. In the Kharkiv direction, the Russians are not conducting new attacks, and for now everything remains stable. Meanwhile, in Vovchansk, the fighting continues, with the Russians attempting to break through near the village of Tykhe. They have made some gains, but the front line here remains stable. In the Sumy direction, activity remains low. According to the latest unofficial information, Ukrainian forces are also conducting counterattacks here and trying to push the Russians back. This means that fighting is taking place mostly on occupied territory. For now, we are waiting for updates on the front line, but as of today, there are no changes. Meanwhile, Poland has finally spoken out firmly against Russia.
I have only one request to the Russian government. If a missile or an aircraft enters our airspace without permission, whether intentionally or by accident, and it is shot down, and the debris falls on NATO territory, don't come here to complain. You have been warned. Thank you.
And in the US, it was confirmed that Trump will soon meet with Zelensky.
The president will also be hosting bilateral meetings with the UN Secretary General and the leaders of Ukraine, Argentina, and the European Union. The president will also later in the day hold a multilateral meeting with Qatar, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, Turkey, Pakistan, Egypt, the UAE, and Jordan.
But as we know, Trump has already said earlier that during this meeting he intends to tell Zelensky that Ukraine should accept Russia's term and stop the war. Zelensky has already arrived in New York, so what do you think about this? How should things move forward? Share your thoughts in the comments. And that's all from me. So please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.